Hi everyone, welcome back to the Gate of Heaven video diary, and if this is your first time to join us, you're very welcome. And we're on this big journey through the Dawnbreakers, which is a chronicle of the story of the Bab, who is the inspiration behind my new album Gate of Heaven, and whose life is being celebrated this year, which is the 200th anniversary of his birth. And so there are loads more videos on my YouTube channel if you want to catch up on the story. But in the last video, the first disciple of the Bab, Mullah Hussein, had travelled to Maku to visit the Bab while he was in prison there. But even though the Bab was a prisoner, this period when he was in Maku, he was really at the height of his creative powers. And there in Maku, he had written the central text of his revelation, this book called the Bayan, the Expression. And the purpose of this book was to lay the foundations that would prepare the people for the imminent coming of him whom God will make manifest, the great promised one awaited by all of the religions of the world, the one who would finally bring about peace on earth. And Mullah Hussein had left Maku, saying goodbye to the Bab for the last time, and the Bab had told Mullah Hussein that a great task lay ahead of him that would help to pave the way for the coming of him whom God will make manifest. But that in order to fulfill this task, he first needed to travel he needed to find a hidden treasure in the province of Mazandaran. And so Mullah Hussein travels to Mazandaran, and he makes his way to the town of Barfarouche, which is the hometown of his fellow disciple Quddús. So you might remember that Quddús was the final disciple of the Bab, the 18th letter of the living, who had recognized the Bab through the sheer keenness of his own spiritual perception. He had identified the Bab merely by looking at the majesty of the way the Bab walked. And Quddús was actually very young. He was only about 20 years old when he became a disciple of the Bab, and he had been specially chosen to accompany the Bab on his pilgrimage to Mecca, where he had publicly proclaimed his message. And Quddús had assisted him all the way. He had even delivered with his own hand the Bab's official letter to the Sheriff of Mecca. And when they had sailed back to Iran, Quddús had gone ahead of the Bab back to Shiraz, where he began spreading the Bab's message around the city. But he was then arrested by Hussein Khan, the tyrant governor of Shiraz. And Hussein Khan had really treated Quddús with this horrendous cruelty. He had burned off his beard, and he had pierced a wire through his nose and dragged him through the streets of Shiraz as an example to the people. And Quddús had then been thrown out of the city. And he then made his way back home to his parents' house in Barfarouche to recover from his injuries. And 2 years have now passed since then, and Quddús has fully recovered, and he is living under the loving care of his parents. And when Mullah Hussein arrives, Quddús hosts him as his guest in his home. And Mullah Hussein tells Quddús about his visit with the Bab in Maku, and he tells him all about this new book, the Bayan, that the Bab has revealed, and the imminent coming of him whom God will make manifest. And Quddús asks Mullah Hussein if he has any of the writings of the Bab with him, and Mullah Hussein doesn't. And Quddús then presents to Mullah Hussein a manuscript with some writing on it. And when Mullah Hussein reads these words, his emotions well up inside of him, and he at first he seems to assume that these are perhaps some writings of the Bab, which he has never seen before. And he says to Quddús, "I can well realize that the author of these words has drawn his inspiration from that fountainhead which stands immeasurably superior to the sources whence the learning of men is ordinarily derived. I hereby testify to my wholehearted recognition of the sublimity of these words, and to my unquestioned acceptance of the truth which they reveal." But as he says this, Quddús is just sitting quietly across from him. And from the expression on Quddús's face, Mullah Hussein realizes that these are not actually the words of the Bab, and that Quddús himself has produced these inspired verses so remarkably similar in their effect to the verses of the Bab. And Mullah Hussein realizes that there is some kind of mysterious connection between Quddús and the Bab. And he remembers that day in Shiraz when he was walking down the street several paces behind the Bab so as not to let anybody know that he had found him. And this dishevelled youth, Quddús, came up to him and pointed at the Bab, telling him that he could tell that that was the promised one simply by looking at the way he walked. And that day the Bab had said to Mullah Hussein, "Marvel not at the strange behaviour of that youth. We have been communing with him in the realm of the spirit. We know him already." And Mullah Hussein then recognizes that the treasure which the Bab wanted him to find in Mazandaran is in fact his fellow disciple, Quddús, and that even though the Bab is locked away in the prison of Maku, his beloved disciple, Quddús, has somehow become this instrument through which the Bab is continuing to transmit his love and his spirit into the world. Quddús has become almost like a mirror reflecting the light of the Bab. And Mullah Hussein bows his head before Quddús and he says to him, "The hidden treasure of which the Bab has spoken now lies unveiled before my eyes. It has dispelled the gloom of perplexity and doubt. Though my master be now hidden amid the mountain fastnesses of Azerbaijan, the sign of his splendour and the revelation of his might stand manifest before me. I have found in Mazandaran the reflection of his glory." Now, there is something of a mystery about what we might refer to as the station of Quddús. And Shoghi Effendi has actually given some clarification about this station that Quddús occupied in a letter written on his behalf. It says, "Regarding the station of Quddús, he should by no means be considered having had the station of a prophet. His station was no doubt a very exalted one, and far above that of any of the letters of the living, including the first letter, Mullah Hussein. Quddús reflected more than any of the disciples of the Bab the light of his teaching." So even though Quddús was not a prophet of any kind, he was a human being, but somehow through his connection to the Bab, he had reached a state of such spiritual maturity that he became this source of light and wisdom among the disciples of the Bab. And there are a few clues in the Baha'i writings as to how this could have happened. There's a beautiful prayer that is very well known in the Baha'i community, but the author of which I believe is unknown. It's a prayer that says, "O God, make me a hollow reed, from which the pith of self hath been blown, that I may become a clear channel through which thy love may flow to others." Now, there's an interesting statement that Baha'u'llah makes in one of his writings. He says that the essence of love is detachment. And when I read this, I thought, oh, that's a surprising thing to be the essence of love. But the more I thought about this, the more it occurred to me that in order to really truly love another human being, you do really have to detach yourself from all of the things that get in the way of giving love to that human being. And perhaps more than anything, one has to detach oneself from oneself, because it's often all of the fears that revolve around our own self, our own ego, that prevent us from truly giving love to each other. And I think that perhaps what happened with Quddús was that he had reached this level of spiritual maturity at such a young age that he had entirely detached himself, from his ego. And by doing that, he had become this hollow reed. He became this clear channel through which the love and spirit of the Bab could just flow freely out into the world. And Baha'u'llah actually describes this phenomenon in more detail with a kind of a mystical description of this in his book The Seven Valleys, and he describes this beautiful way of this light of God appearing in a human being that has truly purified their heart. So I'd love to share this with you. This is from The Seven Valleys. Baha'u'llah says, "A pure heart is as a mirror. Cleanse it with the burnish of love and severance from all save God, that the true sun may shine therein, and the eternal morning dawn. Then wilt thou clearly see the meaning of earth and heaven cannot contain me. What can alone contain me is the heart of him that believeth in me. Whensoever the light of the revelation of the King of Oneness settleth upon the throne of the heart and soul, his radiance becometh visible in every limb and member. At that time the mystery of the feigned tradition gleameth out of the darkness. A servant is drawn unto me in prayer, until I answer him. And when I have answered him, I become the ear wherewith he heareth. For thus the master of the house hath appeared within his home, and all the pillars of the dwelling are ashine with his light." And as the pressures increase on the Bab's followers, and the tension builds between those who embrace his message and those who want to destroy it, Quddús really becomes this beacon of light, this radiant source of courage and strength for his fellow disciples. And his own story actually comes to a very heroic but also tragic climax in a great upheaval that takes place in his own home province of Mazandaran. So we will learn more about Quddús in the coming videos. Thank you so much for watching, and as usual I'd be so grateful if you would give this video a like and share it with your friends, and subscribe to my YouTube channel. And if you would like to support my work, you can become a patron at patreon.com/lukeslott. So thanks again for watching, and I will see you in the next video. Bye.